Hello and welcome to the Recruit Rockstars podcast, where we focus on the people part of your venture capital-backed or private equity-backed company. I'm your host, Jeff Hyman. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. Today's guest is an advisor, an investor in a couple of dozen companies, and we're going to talk about how he finds the time to do that. But the reason I wanted to have him on the show is he's also a four-time entrepreneur. So he's been in your shoes and he knows how to scale a team, how to recruit a team. He started and ran Triggit and grew it to 60 employees before its acquisition by LinkedIn. And then since then, he's been investing and getting involved in advising a whole bunch of companies, including Cruise Automation. If you're not familiar with Cruise, it was acquired by GM last year for a cool $1 billion. That's with a B. So with all that said, Zach Coelius, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making some time.
My pleasure.
So why don't we start with your life as an entrepreneur? Just for means of background, how did you decide to get involved with Triggit? What was kind of the backstory there? And then we'll shift to the people part.
Yeah. I like to joke that I've never had a real job. I've had four sort of ventures, and now I guess I'm on my fifth as an investor, four sort of companies, and now on my fifth. But yeah, never done real work. And Triggit was an accident, actually. So when I first got out of grad school in 2005, I came out to Silicon Valley trying to find a job. And so I started crashing conferences, sneaking in and pretending like I belonged at sort of Web 2.0 and demo. And
those
CKA.
Things are expensive, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a poor college kid. I couldn't pay $10,000 for a ticket. And thankfully people let me kind of stay, which was cool. But then was looking for a job, but didn't really want to tell everyone I was looking for a job because nobody really likes that guy. They're sort of like, yeah, here's my card, email me, but they don't really want to be your friend because they figure you're just going to butter them up the rest of the day. So I started telling people I was working on an idea in ad tech, which I had. Terrible idea, but I had an idea in ad tech.
It qualified as an idea.
It was an idea, not a good one. But yeah, people were suddenly like, hey, I want to help you. I want to invest in you. I want to give you, I want to help you. And I was like, oh, well, I guess we got to do this now. So I called up my sister, who I had done my last three ventures with, and was like, hey, we got a company. So she moved to San Francisco and off we went.
And Triggit was it.
Triggit was it. It was 10-year slog. Quite a journey.
Everyone thinks it's an overnight success. You and I both know that's not true.
Yeah, it's. I heard the Sean Parker quote yesterday, which I think is one of my new favorites, which is like, building a startup is like chewing glass. It's so long and so hard that eventually you like the taste of your own blood.
And then eventually it goes down.
Yeah, it's a crazy
Tell
ride.
us, real briefly, the big idea behind Triggit at the time. This was 2005, I think?
Yeah, so we went through 7 pivots in our years. Always in ad tech, always kind of serving sort of direct response customers, but lots of different sort of product ideas, totally different code bases, just sort of like trying to find product market fit. The big idea that really sort of got the business going was we were one of the very first companies to jump into what's called real-time bidding, which is sort of the sort of protocol behind advertising now. Back when it was 20 million impressions a day being auctioned off on the entire world of RTB, real-time bidding. Now it's like 600 billion a day or some crazy number.
It's how advertising is done now.
It's how advertising is done now, yeah. But we basically were one of the first companies to sort of like, oh, this might work. If it works, it'll be big. Let's try it. And we got lucky. Rode that wave.
I'm sure it just wasn't luck, but you scaled it to 30 million revenues. So let's shift to kind of the people part of the business.
Yeah.
I understand you grew to about 60 people or so.
Yeah.
How did you learn how to do that? So typically hiring, recruiting, culture building is not taught in college. I know you went to grad school, but where did you kind of figure that out?
I don't know if it's ever clear that we did figure it out. We just sort of figured it out as we went. I love reading business books. Like that's all I really read. So the history of businesses, the history of entrepreneurs, the history of, basically any business book that's been written, I've probably looked at it or tried to look at it. And there's a lot of really good stories if you go back and, look at sort of what those who've gone before us about how to think about that problem. Generally, it comes down to like find smart people, which is hard, right? find people who align with sort of your beliefs and your culture and your values, and then just give them the rope to hang themselves or to do great things. And we failed miserably over and over and over again doing that. But we also had some.
Tell listeners about one of those failures. You don't have to name names, but was it bad hires, or what was when you say we failed, what did you fail at?
Oh yeah, bad hires. Bad hires. I mean, at the end of the day, the way I look at it is that bad hires and bad management and lots of badness. I mean, it was one of the difficulties we went through is that when we found product market fit, we grew from $1 million in revenue to $30 million in revenue in about 12 months.
So hyper growth.
And we grew from about 15 people to 60 people in that point in time. And we just made up just so many mistakes. And, the thing I like to say with the startups I work with now, if you grow faster than sort of 200% a year in headcount, you're going to have, it's like anything that grows really fast, it becomes a cancer, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what cancer is. It cells that grow out of control, and cancer will start to basically enter your organization when you grow that quickly. And those cancers can be very, very, very deadly, like super problematic. And we had them across the board in every part of our org.
Well, what do you attribute to the fact that it didn't kill you? I mean, you went from more than 200% growth.
Yeah. I think growth as an engine will make up for a lot of failures of every other component of your business. So our customers were begging us to basically like give them more. And we had endless sort of fuel to the fire. So you can make a lot of mistakes when you're growing as quickly as we were growing.
Revenue cures a lot of problems.
Yeah, until Facebook kind of like decided they wanted to take our business for themselves and gutted us. We were on fire. And so, we kind of were able to grow through a lot of those mistakes. And if you look at most of the fast growing companies out there, I mean, they're a disaster. Internally, there's so many different problems, but if they have growth, they can usually kind of work their way through that stuff.
You mentioned hiring smart people.
Sure.
Is there such a thing as employees that are too smart? And by that, I mean, is intelligence the first thing that you look for? Or can you think of situations where the role didn't require intelligence as much as something else, and you missed that other thing because you were so focused on intelligence?
That's a good question. I mean, I think intelligence is a filter, but it's not an end all. Competence is the most important thing. What you're really looking for is somebody who really deeply understands the problem that they're going to solve today and tomorrow. So when you're growing really fast, you can't just solve for today's problems. You really have to solve for tomorrow's problems. And who has the ability to come in and, solve problems. And, some of those people may not be, bookworms and brilliant in physics or math, but like if they're super competent, that's critical. But culturally, if they're dumb, it's going to be a struggle as the company grows, because the problem is as soon as people get outside of their comfort zone and they no longer are operating from experience, they need to be able to rationally think through and understand the new problem set, and their judgment and their ability to understand the context becomes critical.
They have trouble figuring out how do you scale and what's going to happen next or what's going to break next, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody is used to doing something one way and you totally grow out of that, well, I would hope you want to hope that that person is smart enough to be able to adapt and evolve.
Yep.
And some people who are super competent in one thing but are not particularly smart really struggle with those transitions. And transitions, I think, are like for a hyper-growth company is super duper important because it's brutal.
The other thing you mentioned earlier, Zach, was kind of culture and DNA fit, I guess you could say.
Sure.
How did you figure out at Triggit how to weight those two competencies? So let's call that kind of ability to do the job, right?
Yeah.
And culture fit or DNA fit, which is kind of how you go about it, how you interact with others. is it 50-50? And did you ever look the other way because the other was so good?
I mean, we made some pretty dramatic mistakes because we were so desperate. I mean, that's one of the problems with fast growth is it creates desperation, because if you don't, millions of dollars are waiting on one person to fill one role. And it's
Right.
like, well, we can make a mistake here. Otherwise we lose millions of dollars. Okay, maybe we can make mistakes. And yeah, then you compromise. And that's one of the core sources of those cancers is those
Yep.
compromises.
Yep.
And culture is one of the key areas where, like, when you make compromises, you're rolling the dice. And the problem is that you're rolling the dice with something that can be kind of out of control. Like, because what happens, it happens behind closed doors, over drinks, around the rest of your team, and
It's very subtle things, right?
You're not aware of what's going on, and it's insidious, right? It creates all sorts of like fundamental problems. Like when we ran into trouble, when Facebook gutted us, I sort of went back to my team thinking it was the team I had 45 people before, and it was not.
Yeah.
And I was not prepared for that. It was,
it had morphed into something else.
It had morphed and it had evolved, and the way that they reacted to adversity was much more challenging. And my leadership had been sort of tuned to a team that was very sort of like a SEAL team, super adaptive. Everyone was close. Like we were like, oh, we just got hit by a truck. No big deal. Hey, let's keep going. Like, oh, bombs are going off around us. No big deal. And all of a sudden, like, we suddenly had this like wound, and part of the culture made it very difficult to respond efficiently to that hit we took, which I would not have been the case 45 people earlier.
I'm sure the listeners are wondering what you meant by Facebook gutted us. Do you mean they recruited away a bunch of people?
Basically. No, we showed them how to make their advertising work. So previous to what we were doing, us and other people, but like previous to us, the average click-through rate and for like an ad was 1 click for every 3,000 impressions. And we were able to basically 100x that. And so they basically were like, oh, that's how you make this work.
That's how you monetize.
That's how you monetize it. And so like what the Facebook ad engine does now, they're very sophisticated, way more sophisticated than we were. But at the time we started working with them, they had no idea what they were doing. And so they basically had to make a strategic decision about like, okay, we need to get this in-house. How do we do that? And we had an acquisition discussion that fell apart for very unfortunate reasons. But they basically then decided, okay, we're going to basically just copy everything that they're doing, and then we're going to shut off the APIs that they're using so that they can't keep doing what they're doing. And all of their customers, who are like the biggest customers in the world, are forced to come work with us directly. It was pretty brutal.
It's the stuff books are written about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I went from it was quite a story.
And then the business was acquired by LinkedIn, correct?
Yeah. So the end, basically, after we had been gutted, we had a bunch of tech and team and talent that LinkedIn acquired. And then the business itself was in a rundown mode, and it was acquired by another entrepreneur who, Got it. I don't want to get into that, but
Understood.
He bought some stuff and did some things, and say love me.
So you spent your time these days advising and investing in early stage tech companies, correct? I guess a couple dozen or something like that.
Yeah, more now, 50 almost. Yeah.
So what can you share with listeners? Most of them are either leading a business or scaling a company of their own. What are the most common mistakes you see when it comes to the people part of their business? Not fundraising, not product market fit, but anything people related. What are the kind of things you see over and over and over again?
Well, I mean, there's a lot, right? One of the big ones is premature hiring. So like a lot of people kind of have come from organizations where they had a team of people who were solving all sorts of different problems. And they like to think about the problem set as a set of roles and as a set of people around the problem set, and they come in and they're like, oh, we need this, we need this, we need this.
They throw bodies at it.
They delineate and structure the team and the roles before they understand the problem. Like one of the discoveries that we found at Triggit was that when you find product market fit, everything inverts. So previous to product market fit, you're struggling for customers, you're struggling for sales, you're struggling for revenue, you're struggling for traction. If everything is like a hand-to-hand combat and you're trying to figure out how to make it work. And then when you find it, it's amazing. Like it's truly just an inversion where everything that previously used to be hard becomes easy.
Right.
And everything that used to be easy, so managing your team, scaling your team, doing day-to-day work, keeping up with growth, handling your database, all that stuff becomes really hard. And so that inversion point is the magic, right? You find that thing and it's like, oh my God, here it goes. But the problem is that no one can predict what that thing is. Like you can make guesses.
Speculate about it.
You can speculate about it, but you go through these two periods where you have a exploration phase, which is the company's job. It is to go out there and make contact with the market and engage with the market. And what I like to say is you want to be able to cold call a customer at 9:00 at night on their cell phone while they're putting their kid to bed, describe what you do in one sentence and have them say, oh my God, hey, hold on, Billy. Hey,
where's my credit card?
I want to talk to you. Call me tomorrow, but I desperately want to talk to you. Yeah. Actually, give me your number. I'm right down. I'm going to call you tomorrow, but I got to put my kid to bed. Like that. I mean, so we used to basically, when we were originally first starting, we would do calls with customers, you know, an hour, 2 hours. And at the end of it, they'd be like, yeah, call me in 6 months. And then when we found product market fit, like the biggest advertisers in the world, people who spend billions a year in marketing, Walmart, Best Buy, Home Depot, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, they basically, we'd set up the calls with them. And literally 2 minutes into the call, they'd be like, send me the contract, let's go. Wow. And I've seen that over and over and over again now. But the problem is that when it comes to a team, the team that is the exploration team is a very different team than the scaling team.
And the operational excellence team, right? It's really two different mindsets.
Yeah, well, you don't really know what you're scaling against, right? You don't know what you're operating against while you're still exploring. And the things that are important, you won't know until you hit the market and you find that fit. And so you really need you need to basically have really adaptive, like evolutionary people in the beginning who can just sort of think on their feet, move fast, and try a bunch of stuff.
Almost more generalists, right?
Yeah, I mean, just people who are open with exploration, which is like, hey, we're going to go into the woods and we might starve and there's going to be tigers attacking us and people are going to shoot at us and we'll probably die. But hey, we might find a gold mine. Yeah. And then once you find the gold mine, you need to bring in almost a whole nother team to help you dig the gold mine. And so the thing is that a lot of people basically start the hiring process saying, oh, well, I need a miner because I'm going to build a gold mine. So therefore I need a guy who can mine. But you're like, well, are we mining a river or are we mining a mountain? Right. Are we strip mining or are we digging straight down? We don't know yet because we haven't found the mine. So you really got to be careful about prematurely hiring.
So your observation or your recommendation is you'd rather be late in hiring once you know definitively what it is we're hiring for and have a scorecard that we can hire against versus trying to get ahead of the curve, which I guess is noble, but you have no idea what the hell you're hiring for.
Yeah. I would rather basically have a small agile team in the exploration phase who I trust and who are comfortable with oh, we're dead. We're going to be out of business tomorrow. Whatever. We'll figure it out. Versus over hiring, because every additional person you add creates friction and it creates it's like glue to your organization. And
it's exponentially hard.
Yeah. You really want to keep it as minimal as possible till you find the mine.
One more quick topic before we wrap up, and that is you're in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, the epicenter of how hard it is to hire right now. Yeah. What advice do you give to your investment portfolio company leaders about how to hire when they can't afford to pay more than Google, they can't afford to pay more than Amazon, so they can't compete on money? What do they compete on to attract the best talent?
So if you go back to the formulation I just gave you, that first team of people is generally people who know and trust you because you're leading them into the woods where they're probably going to starve to death or be mauled by tigers. Those are the only people who are going to come with you on that journey. And the people you really want to have on that journey are people you trust. And people who trust you, you don't have to pay them more. Yep. They join you because they believe that you and they will do something great together. And so in the exploration phase, your hiring should actually not be that hard, because you should be hiring people where you have a 10x advantage against every other company because they want to work with you.
Right.
If you don't have that network, well, you're probably not going to make it work. Like you should wait until you have that network until you try to do something like that.
And then what about when it comes time to scale?
Well, once it comes time to scale, you have that 10x response rate. Like you have customers basically be like, oh my God, I want this. And then it just becomes your job to convince people that growth. You can be like, hey, we just signed up Booking.com, Walmart, Best Buy, Home Depot. They spend $1 billion a year on advertising. They want to spend an unlimited amount with us. We're currently worth $10 million, but we're going to be worth $300 million in 12 months. Be part of that journey. And people, and the great thing about Silicon Valley is it's really, really difficult to hire people where you don't have a delta, but like you don't have an advantage. But when you do have a delta, people
flock
come running
to that, right?
They will, because it's like this business is a search for growth. So if you find that gold mine and you come out and you show people the nugget and you're like, there's a gold mine in there, the best people in the world will come running to help you do that.
Because they're compelled to that challenge and that opportunity. It almost sounds like if you can't find the formula to product market fit with customers, in other words, like you said, that person who's putting the baby to bed, but they want to talk to you.
Yeah.
If you can't do that, you're gonna have trouble attracting the best talent too, for the same reason, right? And inversely, once you crack the code on customers, hiring becomes a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Oh, it's trivial. Well, trivial is the wrong word. It's actually really hard, but it's much
doable.
Easier.
Yeah.
It's possible. Yeah.
Zach, I really appreciate you making the time today. How can people learn more, follow you, and get in touch?
The best way to get a hold of me is either LinkedIn or Twitter. Go ahead and shoot me a note on either one of those. I read all of them.
Great.
And
and we'll link to those.
Awesome.
Thanks,
you very much.
Zach.
Good talking to you.